drank pots and pots and pots and pots of strong black coffee, trying to keep my sleepy soul awake. But the sleepiness still comes along, and when it does, it's fast and strong. I end up with a bad case of the shakes.
Hey, good morning, it's Guido. It's time for coffee talk. I got my coffee and I've got my fruity looking little cup right here. God bless the wife and her fruity coffee cups. All right, here we are. Let's talk tanks. I'm going to talk three things. We're going to talk about, in two sections, the new update 9.20. We'll talk about some of the general notes. Remember that this is in super test, so a lot of this stuff is early information, but we've got a little bit more fidelity. And then we'll break down some of the buffs that are coming to the tanks, discuss that a little bit. Some of that might go a little bit negative, so at the end of this we're going to finish up with me discussing why I like this game, why I think this is such a good game, and why I actually continue to play it. So we'll be positive as far as that goes. So let's get started diving into the super test notes. Alright, here we are, 9.20 super test notes. I already mentioned it, but it bears mentioning again. A lot of this can change, so don't get too much into an uproar, although I will discuss things that I'm not very happy with as we go through. But update to 9.20 preview comes in two sections on the website. The second section is for the buffs to various tanks. What's funny, actually, real quickly, I'll show you this. There's a section here that says, instead of covering the buffs as part of the 9.20 preview, we ran a standalone article on Tech Tree Revision. Awesome, a standalone article. Well, let's see what happens when I click on that. It's a standalone article. Oh, it's the same article. So they sort of missed the boat on their link right there. All right, anyway, vehicle rebalance, we'll get that in a minute. So what's going to happen with 9.20? There are some SPG improvements. Basically, they are limiting the ability of SPGs to stun you through solid cover, which is something that's happening right now. So that's good. I don't know whether they just missed that or they intended it and people didn't like it or what happened there, but fences, real thin buildings, shacks, things like that, you're still going to take some damage through. If it's a solid indestructible, you're not going to take damage through it. They actually have a 2+ meters thick, so I don't know if they model that for some of the undamageable stuff. Are they all 2 meters thick? I'm not sure what goes on there, but it also discusses if a bit of your tank is sticking out and some of the splash can get to it, you're going to take a stun, but you're going to get reduced stun out of it, so that's not bad. Good deal. You're also going to know the total stun time you caused at the end of the battle. Whee! I am going to have a video fairly soon talking about this whole damage while stunned thing and how false that game mechanic is and how it's actually not panning out that way, but that's for later. New Chinese TDs. Let's see, you're taking a look at these guys. What do they look like? They look like Soviet TDs because that's what they are, rebranded Soviet TDs essentially, but the Chinese are going to get a TD line, and that's cool. I always like new content, and that means I get to grind again. Oh, jeez. All right, so you can explore the vehicles right there. We won't go into exactly what those are right now. Some of those numbers will change, but I imagine they're very similar to the Soviet versions at the same tiers. This is interesting. New scenario for random battles, which they are calling Grand Battle. Grand Battle. All right, let me have a drink on that one. No, there's nothing in there, just coffee. All right, so this looks to be like an offshoot of what they were calling Frontlines, which they super tested or sandboxed, actually, I believe. I never played it. It was an attempt to make a 30v30 or at least more tanks on the board kind of game mode. This looks to be a kind of beta test that they're going to release into the public for us to take a look at and see if it works, which seems to be something they're doing a lot now. Throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. Now, I'm not necessarily against this right off the bat, so let's kind of look at what it is going to do. It will be a 30v30 grand battle with 60 players. That's what 30 plus 30 equals. On a 1.4 by 1.4 Nebelberg map. So if you consider our biggest maps are currently 1,000 meters by 1,000 meters, so 1.0 by 1.0. It's not that much bigger than our biggest map, and they're going to stuff another 15 tanks on it. Alrighty, and guess what? all this stuff is not usable. So that is going to be a lot of tanks, and maybe that's the point, just to have a lot of targets and tanks and complete chaos going on. But that's what it sort of looks like to me. We'll see how it goes in practice. Maybe 1.4 by 1.4 does fit 30 guys on each side better than I think it does. I haven't played it, so I don't know, but man, that seems a little bit claustrophobic for 30 tanks on each side. It's only for tier 10 battles, and it's going to be embedded in your, as of right now, embedded in your random queue, which means you'll queue up your tier 10, and occasionally you're going to get this 30v30 grand battle, which, I don't know, could be interesting. So we'll see what happens with that. As long as the map is good, it could be a nice distraction at tier 10. The number of SPGs is limited to 4 per side. Oh, jeez. Yeah, kind of a claustrophobic map for 30v30, and then you're going to toss 4 SPGs on it. That'll be fun. How about pushing a guy's cap with 4 SPGs in all those TDs? So we'll see. I don't want to be too negative. It could actually be pretty cool. It is, as far as I'm concerned, the newest kind of mode they've tried to put out. This is definitely a departure, because 15v15 has been hard-coded in the game for a very long time, and 30v30 could actually be very interesting. I will say, let's say a couple things about this though as well. If you are a not very good player, and there are plenty of them at tier 10 at this point, and you feel like you constantly get waxed at tier 10 because you really don't know what's going on and there's so many tanks, just think about how you're going to feel with a 30v30. And then extrapolate that forward into people who feel like everything's random, matchmaker determines the match, they have nothing to do with whether they win or lose. Now you can say, well, I'm 1 of 30, so there really, literally is nothing I can do. That's going to be interesting. We'll see what happens. Actually, there is one other thing I did want to discuss here, because they said they're going to use their standard matchmaking, and one big issue I can see with this matchmaking-wise, because they refuse to balance the medium to heavy part of the matchmaker, could you imagine getting a huge imbalance of heavies to mediums on this map when there's 30 tanks? Holy cow, that would be a bummer. All right, HD models, we're moving on. Bunch of kind of obscure tanks. Anything anyone actually plays? Well, there's a Panzer IV thing, I think. There's a crummy little Arty, another Arty. Oh, there you go, T-44. Awesome. Okay, there you go, 54E1, that'll work. And one of the Germans, 3000 something or other, P thing or Majabber, VK, whatever. Good stuff. All right, so let's have another drink of coffee there. HD models, 30v30 battles, occasionally at tier 10. Chinese, new content, yay, new content, awesome, thank you. Wargaming, that'll work. SPG's getting adjusted a little bit. I did not read anywhere that they're removing them, so we're not quite there yet. Just kidding already, guys, you're all right. And we'll move on to the next one. Hey, we're interrupting your regular scheduled coffee talk with a bit of an update. The next section is going to talk about some of the buffs, and I completely missed something. So when I get to the TD section in the next section for the French, ignore what I say right there, because I got it completely wrong. So quickly from the beginning, the AMX 50 Foch B, not the Foch, I know, the Foch, the Foch, Foch, is it Foch? I think it's Foch. Anyway, the 155, something goofy is going on with this one actually. They are going to keep the 155, but they're going to introduce a new tier 10. And the old 155, you can see it right here in my garage. Let me see if I can show it to you. Oh, that's me disappearing. Hold on. There it is. That guy's going to stay in your garage, and it's going to be a special vehicle. I think what that means is it's not exactly a premium, but any crew, potentially. Because what it says in the verbiage is, if you have it unlocked and bought, you're going to get the new 50 Foch B. You're going to keep the 155. The crew and stuff's going to go over to the 50B, but it says that any crew can be used in the Foch 155. And I said in the next section, I'm going to tell you that the 155mm is gone. Well, it's not really gone. It's still on the Foch 155. Interesting. So it's kind of a free special vehicle. That's really cool. So they're going to allow us to keep it, and they're going to put a new tier 10. All right, back to our regularly scheduled program. Remember, ignore the portion where I talk about the Foch 155 in the next section because I goobered it up. There you have it. And if you want all the details, read it right there. It's pretty cool. Okay, dokie, we're getting a lot of buffs. Overall stuff. This rebalancing effort appears to be buffing everything up to sort of deal with premium ammo. That's what I see as the larger picture right here with all the buffs. It's not going to stop premium ammo from penning you in a lot of these places, but they are buffing armor, and it appears they're balancing for premium ammo and not balancing for regular ammo, regular AP, or whatever regular ammo your tank has. And I think that is extremely bad. It's a bad, bad situation. But let's talk about what's going on. You'll notice that in the background I had my T54 back there. So let's take a look there. Yep, there it is, T54, one of the best Tier 9 Soviet, actually Tier 9 medium of any kind, tanks. So naturally, it needs a buff. What? Okay, the T44, and most of this stuff is ended up being at the turret. There are some hull buffs, but most of these are, interestingly, turrets getting buffed, for mediums especially. Because they are having a hard time doing any kind of hold down thing against gold. And I don't think a lot of this is going to help against gold too much. It will a little bit. Obviously, any more armor is going to help with gold. And if it starts to get close to where a low roll on an APCR round will bounce, then obviously it will help. But these are not going to stop any gold rounds, especially from larger caliber guns. But this is what's going on. And we can see that the T44, T44-100 is getting a buff. These are effective armor values that they're showing. So obviously angled, you're getting 338, and the mantlet area is getting a buff right there. Yep, T54, he needed more armor on the front. What? There are some gun buffs involved in here as well. The gun's getting re-wickered a little bit. Interestingly, in the Soviet tree, they are buffing the reload speed on the 122. You'll remember, and I didn't really remember this because I haven't looked at the guns for a long time. A lot of the Soviet 8 and 9 tier mediums can carry the 122, and nobody did it because it was kind of a WZ-120 gun, or maybe the T-34-3 if you have that gun. Same idea, but a very, very long reload, so it wasn't a very effective gun. So they're buffing the reload time on that, and that may become then a more effective, viable gun with that big 390 Alpha on Tier 8 mediums, and so that can be interesting. So you're getting a buff on those guys. The T62 is getting a buff. The Object 140 is getting a buff, and what's interesting about what they said is, and I'm trying to find it, there you go. The medium tank revision should cement their role as active MTs with strong turret armor because they didn't have that role already. Oh, cement, right, it was starting to slip, got it. Through significant increases in frontal armor thickness, it will allow Soviet tanks to soak up damage with their turret while hiding the hull behind cover, which is what they do already. Arguably not the T-44, probably the weakest of all of them at doing that. But there you go. Heavy tanks for the Soviets. IS-7 is getting a buff mostly to the gun, and it looks like, I think, a little bit of extra hit points, which I want to say it's one of the lowest hit points heavies out there. That will be good for the IS-7, which is kind of irrelevant at the moment. I mean, it's a decent tank, but a little buff is probably going to help it. Here's one that is going to cause major tears. The ISU-152 is losing the BL-10. Ooh, oh golly. It's getting a 152 D4S, which is the replacement. It says in here that it's similar. The word is similar, but it is a nerf as far as all of the stats go. And it's got a lower penetration. And I don't know if that's the gold. I'm assuming that's actually the standard round, but 260 is pretty high. I didn't look at it. It's still going to be the boom TD, though, so they say. They're also going to improve its armor and mobility. There are multiple TDs getting mobility buffs, and that is a bit of an issue because in the corridor meta, you don't need more mobile TDs with good front armor. being able to spin and fire and move forward and peek-a-boom and things, that's awful on a corridor meta. But that's what they're doing. That is what they're doing. 704 is getting an alternative gun, that same 152 D4S, while the BL10 is still going to be there. Now, alternative gun, I don't know, maybe it reloads faster. I'm not sure what the bonus is there, if anything, or if it's just a sub gun to the BL10. And the Object 268 is getting some buffs. It's getting a armor-piercing shell speed increase, which is good because it's a pretty slow shell. And the depression is going to be better, so that may make it slightly more viable, but I do not see any mobility buffs for the Object, which is kind of what that one actually needs. So that's the Soviets, and you get to the French vehicles. This is once great, the French line is now a shadow of its former self. It's been retreating for years. I'm kidding, French guys. You're awesome. The TDs clearly are bad. And it says that the AMX 30 and 30B basically fight as Leopard PTA and Leopard 1. And that's pretty much true, except for the giant tumors, which are easily hit. Sometimes you can't even hide behind things with that tumor because it's like little tumor sticking up behind the rubble and you're getting your rear kicked. You take all your damage through that little hatch. I guess the shells go in and then travel down and come in and kill all your guys or something. It's a game mechanic, kind of drives me nuts, but that's what we got. I don't know what else you would do, to be quite honest, but it's kind of funny if you think about it. Your entire tank died by getting shot through a hatch. At some point, the hatch just needs to blow, Gus. All right. That was getting a little bit off track right there, wasn't it? So they are improving the front armor of these guys, and supposedly that's going to make them kind of ridge brawlers and differentiate them between the Leopard and the Leopard PTA, except that if you'll notice this armor, especially on the side right here, just 80 to 150. Okay, that does nothing. 100, pen it by everybody. If you happen to be able to soak up a shot right into the mantlet, you get that 200 to 260. Still, it's a buff for the 30B and for the 31ER prototype. We'll see if that differentiates the French tanks from them. There's also a gun buff in there, which is something they need. The guns on those things are really troll. Very strange. All right, heavy tanks. What do we got? 5100. Has good mobility. They're doing something to that. What is it? What's going on there? Oh, improvement on gun depression. That was the big one right there. That one is very painful, actually, to use gun depression-wise. Guess what, fellas? The Bat Chat, and it's even in its own little highlighted area right there. They're not touching it as of right now. There was a big nerf coming and people lost their minds. I agree with this. There was no reason to nerf it. It's been power creeped a little bit. The Bat Chat's still an effective tank, but it didn't need a nerf. It's not that great. Tank destroyers are doing quite a bit right there. The big one is that they're adding autoloaders to their line. I want to say it starts at tier 8 potentially. And obviously they get better as they get higher, and it's 120 millimeter. The Foch 155 will no longer be the Foch 155 because they're going to pull the 55 off of it, and it's going to go down to a 120 autoloader. So all the 120 is different versions of the autoloader as it moves up. Did we need more autoloader TDs? I thought we got rid of a cancerous one a while ago because of that very reason. The 155's issue was always being able to get the autoloader shots all off without being destroyed. And because the inter-clip reload was so long, you almost never got to lay out all that damage without getting just absolutely crushed, or the other tank just plain old getting away. So it was a very limited capability. I don't see how the 120 makes that much different. If you can stay hidden and behind a bush and never be seen, then yes, you can be effective. But that's pretty much every TD, isn't it? They're getting a little bit of an armor on the side and some other things like that, which I don't think are going to be really a big deal. And the Foch, AMX 50 Foch B. And there's some technical details of the transition. I'm not going to go through that. It's quite complicated on what's going on with that thing. People are going to have to dig through that themselves. Sorry, not helping you. There you go. German vehicles, heavy tanks. Mauschen is getting a mobility buff, I think. Yep, mobility. So more mobility on the mouse. That's interesting. More mobility on the Mauschen. Okay. The mouse is getting a nerf, which it pretty much needs. It's going to have a nerf to the gun reload speed and the hit point pool is going to be brought down a little bit. I don't see the hit point pool. It's so high anyway, that's not going to matter a whole bunch. But the reload speed will matter, because right now it can really lay out the damage and soak up the damage. It should be more of a soak up the damage guy vice a lay out the damage kind of guy. We'll see how that goes. And I think those are small enough nerfs that it's not going to hurt it too bad. This was interesting. Going back to my TDs are getting buffs in mobility. The Malshin, or just the Malshin, blah, blah, the 8.8 centimeter pack 43 Yogg Tagger is getting a mobility buff because it needed a mobility buff. No, it didn't. It didn't need a mobility buff, but it's getting one. American medium tanks also, so the theme of the turrets getting buffed so that they can handle to some extent some gold ammo is what's happening right here with the Patton and the M46 Patton for the 48 and the 46. Says in the writing here it's going to make them better ridge brawlers. They're already pretty fantastic ridge brawlers. The point of these is not to poke out and get hit. The point of these things is to poke out, hit, and avoid being hit back. But now that they've got some armor, it looks like maybe some tier 8s and 7s or such will bounce off of it, but you're still going to get punched in the face. This tank, not as much as this one, but the 46 always had really troll angles right there, and especially if you're trying to fire heat at this guy, it already got all kinds of good bounces. But there you have it. And the last we get to is the Japanese tanks. Gonna need a little coffee. This one gets interesting. The 01 Experimental is going to lose that great big ridiculous gun that it has. Is it a 105? Yeah, it's a 105. So that's going away. And it's getting more armor. So it's going to be closer to the 01 armor-wise. This thing was always pretty soft, pretty easy to pen. It's getting an armor upgrade, which is interesting because everything at tier 5 has great pen, right? So a crappier gun, but a lot more armor. We'll see how that works at tier 5. Oh boy. All right, and the 01 then is getting a bit of armor nerf, especially I think the sides, and it doesn't show that. And the rear. Oh, actually, this is the rear. There you go. So the rear armor is getting a lot of nerfs. I don't know if the side's actually being touched. So the rear is getting nerfed because it's so easy in the corridor meta to get around behind these guys, right? I don't know how that balances the 01. It's still got the big derp. It's still got the fantastic front armor. And if you get around the back, whatever. The OHO, the Type 4, and the Type 5 are getting some changes to their guns to make their AP rounds more effective. This was interesting to me when they sent these guys out to the wild and allowed us to use them when they added them to the game, because their AP rounds and their AP gold rounds were pretty anemic. And there was a very small difference between the pen of the AP round and the gold AP round, which was also just another AP round, happened to be slightly better. So it wasn't APCR or heat or anything like that. But the difference between the two pens was small, and I always wondered if that was the wave of the future, if they were looking at that to go, okay, we're gonna start making our gold have a smaller increase in pen value. Maybe they took that info and decided that wasn't the way to go, and now they're kind of fixing it. I'm not sure. I never read anything about that, but that's what I felt like. But now I think really what we have is what I discussed earlier, is we have a lot of buffs to armor, especially at the higher tiers, at the 8, 9, 10 tier, in order to try to mitigate some of the gold spam, which is, of course, is only going to cause more gold spam. I don't get it. The other big news, in theory, is the weak spots on the Type 4 and the Type 5 because they're so weak. They're not, what are they, 10, 20 millimeters less than the rest of the thing? Those aren't weak spots. Those are marginally weaker spots. They still require gold, don't they? There are a few tanks that have good enough pen with the AP to go through there and with a high roll to go through there. But if you want to pen one of these guys from the front, weak spot or not, you're going to push 2. If you're in a bind and don't have any, yes, you have a couple weak spots to look for, but that is not the primary place you're going to shoot these dudes. The primary place you're going to shoot these dudes is 2. And then in these nice flat spots where 2 will go through. All right, that's it for the buffs on the tanks. We talked about that. We talked about the section before with the 30v30 and the other updates. Again, super tests, a lot of the stuff could change. We'll see what happens. And now let's talk about why I like this game and why I play it. And maybe it's why you do. All right, why do I like this game? Why do I play it? Why do I think that's probably similar to everybody else? And why do I think that's applicable to the discussion we've had today? I think it's applicable because the changes that are happening in the game to some extent are starting to erode some of the reasons that I really liked this game. So let's break it down. Why do I play? What brought me to World of Tanks? Why was it a game I've spent so much time, money, and effort on? Well, first is obviously the historical content. I think that is an attraction to a lot of people. Obviously, you can tell I'm an older gamer. I've been playing games since the Commodore PET in 1978 or so when my dad brought that bad boy home. And I started typing in basic programming with a cassette tape and little Star Wars games and asteroids and blah, blah, blah. So ever since then, I've been a gamer, and I've also been interested in history. So I think that brought a lot of the older gamers set to this game. They advertise it on the History Channel. They advertise it in history in the World War II magazines, all that kind of stuff. So the content's pretty cool, and people like it. So that right before World War II, even approaching back to somewhat at the end of World War I, World War II, and then going a little bit past that into the early Cold War years, that's pretty fantastic content. Lots of tanks, lots of designs. All that kind of thing. You can see by the number of tanks that we have that it is a history-rich era for tanks. So there's that piece. That brought me. The speed of the game. Why is the speed of the game important? I never did like too much the Twitch FPS shooters. So I'm going to throw some names out, and some of these may not be exactly Twitch, but I'll describe what I mean. Call of Duty, World at War, some of these other things where you're a guy and you're running around and there's bunny hopping and diving and run and gun and all this crazy stuff. One of those games that I liked the best, and I can't remember which one it was, I don't think it was Call of Duty, but it had what was called a crouch server, and where you had to move by crouching, which slowed the game down and made it much more kind of tactical and interesting. I absolutely loved that. Well, this game is very similar to that idea, that it moves relatively slow. There are some fast scouts. You can do some run and gun, but in general, in this game, it is more of a thinking man's game, and your positioning matters, and your aiming matters, and because the reload speeds are so relatively long, especially as compared to some of those run and gun FPSs, it gives you some time to think, and it makes those shots matter, and that is actually extremely interesting to me. And anything that makes it speed up, that makes shots selection and aiming matter less, like gold and things like that, that's a net negative for me for the game. That takes things away from the game. PvP. The PvP in this game is fantastic. I'm glad there's no PvE. Okay, I'm glad there's no bots to go fight. I know a lot of people want that, and that's probably going to be might get added at some point. I think they have it in World of Warships already. And that's fine if that's your thing, but I love that this is PvP, that I know that there's another human sometimes. I think they're human. Anyway, person on the other side that I'm actually beating, or he beats me, because that changes the calculus considerably. Bots will do certain things. Sometimes you can start to learn what their flow is, what their tactics are. But for a human, you just never know what ridiculousness is going on. And that makes every single one of these games that I play, every match I get into, you don't know what's going to happen. You can look at the setup, you can look at the map, you can understand the meta, you can think you know what's going to happen, but often something completely weird happens. Then you have to react to that, and that makes the game interesting. Plus the content, all the different tanks, all the different ways you can play the game, that PvP competition thing is one of the bigger draws. One of the bigger draws. I'm gonna say this a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but I actually do mean it. In general, the game is relatively mature as far as the people that play it goes. I know if you're on the forums, or a lot of times you get some ragers in the game. To include me at times, you can be quite immature, but I think you understand my point. It's a more mature kind of group of people. Most of the people I've met and most of the clans that I've interacted with have been actually older guys, and I do like that. And that's fine if the kids play it and younger people. That's not my point. This is not an ageist thing. But for me as an older gamer, I do enjoy that quite a few older gamers actually like this game and play it. and play it quite a bit. Short matches. I like that you can sit down and play a match or two, and the longest it's going to ever take is 15 minutes. I think that's fantastic because that allows people who have a busy life, who don't want to, say, play an RPG where they've got to go do a raid and it's going to take 4 hours to get through it, or they're playing EVE and the battle's going to last half a day or whatever the case may be. Those are all fantastic, good. I appreciate those kind of games are out there, and sometimes that's what you want to do. But for this game, I appreciate that it is a concise, small, contained 15 minutes. I can get in, get out, or I can sit down for 2 hours and play, but it's just a series of matches as it's going across. I love that part about it. So essentially I can play and leave. So, I mean, there you go. That's why I think this game is so fantastic. That's why I think that this game has lasted so long. The last thing then is just the mechanics of it itself. We make a lot of fun of RNG and Matchmaker, but RNG is one of the things that actually makes this game. Personally, I would like to see a little less RNG, and that's a subject for later, for maybe another coffee talk. I don't want randomness to have too much of an impact, but if you're talking about dispersion and taking shots, if every shot went exactly where you pointed, I think this game would be less for it. I really do. I think the game would be less for it. I do appreciate some RNG. I do think it's a little bit too much, but it is a good part of the game. Like I said, there you go. The reasons I like this game. Leave it in the comments if you agree or disagree with any of those. I'm kind of curious. The rest of you, I've got 277, I think, subscribers, so there's probably a lot of opinions out there on why they like the game, and I think it's important to what Wargaming is doing and improving or not improving in the game. You know, are they actually talking to their core audience? The core audience happens to be Russian, actually, so we don't have a whole lot of sway there, but still curious from the North American or European English-speaking side, or even if English is second language. Let me know what you think. Well, that's pretty much it for Coffee Talk. Appreciate you guys coming by. I always appreciate your support and your views and all that good stuff. That's pretty much it. Have another drink of coffee or tea for my Brit friends. Take it easy, and we will see you.